Welcome to another edition of the Sim Racing Garage. I'm Barry Rowland, and today we have another review for you. Today we're going to be reviewing the Sim pedals from Main Performance PC. Now these are a GT configuration, as you probably noticed right away, instead of the usual pedal sets that you see that I've reviewed here, where the pivot points for the pedals are on the bottom, and they're mounted to the bottom. These are actually hanging up high like they are in a real car. And that's why we call them a GT pedal configuration, because a lot of GT type cars will have this kind of configuration for you to use on the pedals. Now, this particular setup, by the way, there's not a whole lot of these around right now as far as a GT kind of configuration. So if you're looking for one, you don't have a lot of options, but this is one of the options. Now, I wanted to show you that this particular setup comes with the upgraded hydraulic system for the brake. Where the normal system has the spring in the load cell, this one actually has the reservoir with the hydraulic fluid in it, the master cylinder, and of course a slave cylinder that actually pulls against some urethane bumpers. And that gives you the travel of the brake pedal and also brake pedal feel. But we'll get to the details on that once we get into the review. Also, these pedals come as a modular unit on these two bars, and these are two 1/2-inch steel bars here. And they have different options to mount these. You have the Abudo regular rig mount, and you have the Abudo Rev 3 or Revolution 3 rig mount. And Main Performance PC actually sells their rigs, so that's why they have mounts for them. This particular mount is a floor mount. And you'll notice these have these little rubber feet I've put on them. And that was just to keep the rough edges from the floor brackets here from scratching up my wood table too much. But I will be taking those off and statically mounting these to the tray in the Sim Experience rig that I have. So we'll get to all that in a minute and put these things through the paces. But next what we're going to do is just do a general overview of the pedals, how they work, and then we'll get into the adjustments of each pedal, which aren't going to be too much because they're not that complex and there's not a whole lot of adjustments to them, just the typical stuff that you'll find on just a regular spring type pedal like these are. But the hydraulic one will be a little bit more complicated, but not that much. So let's go ahead and get to it. Okay, as you can see, that I've taken the pedal modules or units off of the steel bars, and these are 1/2-inch steel rod, they call it. And you can see up top here there's little bevel places on it, and that just makes it easier to put it through the holes in the brackets over here. You'll also see we have some grub screws or set screws in these metal collars. So I can get some focus here. And what that does is allow you to locate and adjust the width, or not really the width, or the location laterally of where your pedal is, and that'll stop that. And they have one on each side of the bracket, which also keeps the bracket nice and parallel on the bars so it doesn't wiggle back and forth. And I did notice that there's only collars on the front bar for these pedals. There are no collars on the rear bar, which I would have liked to seen, which I think would help some of the lateral stability of each pedal unit. But we'll see that once we get everything mounted up again. Oh, by the way, these are 1/8-inch set screws, and all of the hardware on this pedal set is fractional. So you'll need a fractional tool set to be able to use them. Now it comes with a tool set, and we'll see that in a minute, but I like to use my own tools, and if you are the same, then you'll like to use your fractional tools for that too. Alright, let's take a look at the pedals. This is the throttle. We'll do that one first. Beautiful machining here on these pedals. They're aluminum on the lever itself, and you can see the machining or tooling marks they left in there. And as you might know from other reviews, I really like that kind of stuff because it kind of shows that it gives it that race car look, I think, when you have the milling left in it. And you have a nice pad on the top, which is aluminum. Let me show you, get an idea of the thickness of that pad. And of course on the bottom of the pad there's some bolts here and extra holes, threaded holes that allow you to adjust the pedal pad itself for height. And again, once we get into the adjustments, we'll look at that. Moving on up, it has a bolt that goes through here, and that's what the pivot point is for this pedal. So when we're using it, it's pivoting there. It's riding on a metal bushing inside of there. See that bushing? And it has two other bushings next to it on each side that help keep it located in the center. And there is a little movement there as far as the pedal lever laterally, but you want some. You don't want it binding up and too tight because then it gives you extra wear that you don't need. And speaking of that kind of thing, we'll move on up to the rod end that they're using to connect the top of the pedal, which is very nice because rod ends can actually turn too. You can see that turning back and forth to keep everything nice and neat, keep it from binding up. And over here on the side, there's a connector rod similar to what I used in my PC stuff when I was flying helicopters. It's got so that it can actually move also. Got little ball joints on them to keep everything from binding up. We have a nice aluminum connector arm there. Very nice piece there. It looks like aluminum, I'm pretty sure it is, on the pot. And speaking of the pot, it's a nice Vichy unit. Let me get you a good look at it there. Get some focus. There we go. Good for like 2 million cycles. That's nice. Here we have a stop in the back, part of the pedal travel adjustments. And the other part of that equation will be this actual rod end up here. You can see it's kind of long, so this threaded bar can actually be threaded in and out of that. And doing that, of course, changes the angle of the pedal this way and that way. And we also have 2 nuts over here that are on the same threaded rod for the spring, and that, of course, changes the preload on the pedal, so it gives you a stiffer or a lighter pedal feel when you're pushing it. And we also have a felt piece right here, and that's pretty nice because that keeps the pedal quiet when you're using it. So when you're actually using the pedal and you let go real quick, that felt will keep it nice and quiet instead of like a piece of metal, just a metal washer there. So that's a nice little touch. I kind of like that. What else we got? Of course, we got nice powder coating on the brackets. They're well done. And we have the controller board on the bottom that you don't remove or to void your warranty. On the sides, we have the plugs for the other pedals, and also a connector over here that goes up to the wheel that you'll be connecting them to if you're going to run it like that and not run it just through the USB port, which is, it's hard to see. So I can get a light on it. There's a USB port back there. There's also an RJ45 looking port for something else, probably flashing the firmware in there. And on the other side, we have, of course, one of the plugs already taken up by the throttle's pot over here. And that's nicely done, by the way, with some braided shielding and some shrink tubing. And if you look here, get you a good shot of this. There's a button here. And the button is for kind of a dual purpose thing. You push it in for calibration, and you also push it in for the mode that you want. And we'll go through that when we're setting up the pedal. So this pedal, of course, the set is going to be compatible with Thrustmaster, Fanatic, Logitech, Xbox 360, Xbox One, PlayStation 3 and 4. So there's a lot of compatibility with these pedals, and I do like that. I mean, it's a nice electronics package in here to make these compatible with other systems in case you want to run it on a console instead of your PC. Right, so I don't think there's anything else we want to talk about. Basically, it's a pretty simple setup. It's well executed, I think. And you'll notice there's 2 holes up here in this bracket. And I'm going to talk a little bit about those later once I get everything put back together, because it looks like they could be used for something. And I'm going to give you my thoughts on that. So that's the throttle pedal, and we saw the steel rods there. And what we'll do next is the brake pedal. Right, so now we can take a look at the brake pedal. And the first thing that we'll see on the brake pedal is the pad is bigger than the throttle or accelerator pad, which is nice. I like a big pad on the brake pedal, and it's the same size on the clutch pedal, which I can go either way on that, but I do like a bigger one on my brake pedal. And some people don't, but that's what I like on mine. Again, a nice aluminum unit with a nice curved face, just like the rest of them. And again, the lever with a nice machining in it. I'm not going to go over that too much because we've already seen it. Let's talk about this hydraulic brake system. I really like the setup on this. It's very compact, very efficient, and just gets the job done. It's all quality materials as far as I can tell. It's Wilwood slave cylinder and a Wilwood master cylinder. And here's your reservoir. And you can see the fluid is actually really topped off on this thing. And I don't know if you can see that in the video. It's going to show up because of the lighting. But you can see that the air starts right there and goes that way. The fluid stops right there. I think you can see it. But it's pretty full, in other words. So tilting it this way is really not going to cause it to get the air down into the master cylinder. In matter of fact, when it shipped, that's the way it shipped. It shipped in that orientation in the box. So as long as you don't move the brake pedal and actuate the piston inside the master cylinder, you should have no fear of getting air into the system. So we'll keep it like this though. So we got a reservoir, of course the fluid's in there and the fluid's down in the master cylinder, and we've got the piston. It runs right off this rod. There's a piston in here with seals, of course. As we press the brake pedal, the piston compresses the hydraulic pedal, or rather the hydraulic fluid, not the hydraulic pedal. And it goes out the end here. It also goes up this coupler into the pressure sensor, which is, and we'll show you here, it's rated 1,000 psi. So you guys can see that. Okay, where's the light? There it is. All right, so, and it has no brand name on this pressure sensor, so I don't know who makes that, but again, as the fluid comes out the end, it goes up there and tells the computer how much pressure you're applying. And it goes out the line here through another coupler, little banjo coupler there with some nice copper washers on it. And we have got some real nice steel, braided steel line there. Again, a nice touch. And it's covered by plastic sheathing. Of course, it goes back into another 90-degree elbow into the slave cylinder. And of course, the slave cylinder has a piston in this housing. And as the fluid goes in, it pushes the piston this way towards the rear of the pedal, which of course causes the rod at the end that's holding the urethane bumpers here to compress. And that gives us the travel and gives us the feel of the stiffness of the pedal. So again, very compact and efficient design. I actually like this. It's not a whole lot to it, but it gets the job done. And it doesn't need to be a whole lot to it, actually. So, anything else I could talk about here as far as features? And again, you see there's a couple of holes in here. And I'm showing you the holes in the front of the bracket again because I'll be mentioning those later. And just for the heck of it, while I have it out, I'm going to show you the clutch pedal, but not too much because the clutch pedal is exactly the same as accelerator pedal. Same everything except the face of the pedal is wider and bigger. And again, has the same Vichet pot on it. Everything is the same, the stops and the springs and what have you. All right. Now this also comes with these brackets. I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and get back to the brackets in a minute and the other accessories that come with it. And we'll shoot that on the next segment. Now we can take a look at the floor standing brackets that came with this unit because I don't have a Revolution 3 Abudo or the regular Abudo. So that's the solution, is one of these. And the way I'm going to mount this is I'm not going to use these rubber feet you see over here. I'm just using that for demonstration purposes to keep it from, because unfortunately there's one little pet peeve I've got on these brackets is these edges right here where these tubes are welded on. You see these tubes here. You can see where they're welded on before they powder coat them. But if you see these edges here, they've got very sharp edges on the corners right here. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to make that show up, but it's kind of, as soon as your finger catches it, I actually almost ripped my finger on that when I first got it. And it's little things like that that takes away from the overall quality to me of a unit. And again, this is just in the floor mounting brackets, not in the actual pedal set. But it could have been hit with a file there before it went to powder coat, I think. But it's just little things like that that detract from a high-end set like this is actually positioned in the market. Now, there's actually some grub screws or set screws that go on top of these holes here. And as you know, of course, as we saw before, the bars fit through these holes. Like that. Very simple. And then we put our set screw in there depending on where we want this located, and then go ahead and tighten it down so it won't move anymore. And of course we have steel collars on this bar also for the pedal assemblies. The feet that come with it are this, it's kind of a spongy rubber. It's kind of flexy, as you can see. And it comes with a bolt, and there's actually threads already. There's a thread insert in there, so you can bolt it up. And that's a 7/32 hex head bolt for those of you who are taking notes at home. It's easy to assemble. You just put it in the hole. Not a whole lot to it, and then you put the foot on it, which I'm going to do again because we're going to do some more messing around with this before we ever get it mounted. And when I get it mounted, I'm not going to use the feet like I said before, because even at 28 pounds, I put enough pressure on a brake pedal, and some of you other people out there might do the same thing, that there's no way that these feet are going to keep this thing from sliding backwards. So I'm just going to drill some holes and mount it statically, which just makes sense. Anything else we want to talk about? We do get an extra bumper in the kit. And this is about the same size as the two bumpers that aren't the really tough red urethane ones, the green and the black one in there. And it's kind of a softy, and we're going to put the durometer again on this to figure out just how soft it is and just how hard it is. You also get these, which are the abrasive, kind of a rubbery feeling, almost like the stuff that they put on pistol grips. So when you grab your pistol, it's not like a skateboard sandpapery feel, more of a rubbery, gritty feel. I kind of like the feel of this, actually. And you get one that's cut for the throttle, and you get one cut for the, and it's got little, it's already been pre-cut there, and that'll fit on the clutch and the brake pad. Get two of those. You also get a little toolkit and some extra bits. There's an extra washer in there for the stack when you change the stack on the urethane bumpers on your brake. And you get a USB cable, which is nice because some stuff doesn't come with a USB cable, believe it or not. And remember to insert the USB cable carefully, which I always try to do. And of course we get an instruction booklet. Very basic instructions there on how to adjust everything that we're going to do next. We're going to get this thing all assembled back together, and then we're going to go ahead and go through the adjustments. We shouldn't take very long before, and then we'll get to actually mounting them to the SimX Experience and start testing them in different games and see how these pedals run. So let's go ahead and look at the pads themselves that are on the pedal levers and see how they work. It's just a couple of bolts in here. These are 3/16 hex bolts. Easy enough to get off. I like to get, they're kind of loosened already. They're not usually that loose. I just pre-loosened them so I wouldn't have to spend forever and a day trying to break them loose if they were too tight. Alright, so we'll just pull the bolts out, and always take the bottom one out first just to keep the pedal from falling this way. If I took the bottom out last and put first, chances are the pedal could fall down, hit something down here and scratch it up, which I hate doing that to pedals. I've learned my lesson over the years of doing things like that, even though I still might do it from time to time just because I'm not paying attention. Alright, so this is what the pedal looks like. It's got a nice curvature to it, a nice radius here for your shoe or foot to go on. Actually, I think I wouldn't ever wear just socks for a pedal set like this. And the bottom, you can see it's got the nice machining or tooling marks in there. I really like to see those. I just love CNC machining stuff. And we've got 5 holes, each one of them tapped with threads. And using the holes here, the highest I can go using the bottomest hole, the most bottom hole down there is there. The lowest I can go using the top hole is down here. So it's almost at its lowest position when it comes stock, at least the way these came. So it was actually one hole up when I took it off. So we're going to leave it there because it kind of looks good to me there. But you never know, once you get these things mounted to your rig, you just don't know where they're going to end up. And you might want to change it and drop it down a little bit. So we'll go ahead and snug these back up. And again, the tolerances are really nice on these pedals and levers here. Everything goes back together very nicely. Right, so there's the pad adjustment. We're going to get to the individual pedal adjustment now, and I'm going to go with the throttle first because it's essentially the exact same as the clutch is over here. So we'll just do the throttle adjustments, and then we won't even do the clutch ones. Then we'll do the brake by itself, because there's a lot more adjustments on the brake that we're going to take a closer look at. Okay, so we'll do the throttle when we get back in the next segment. Okay, let's look at the adjustments on we're going to do the clutch pedal, because the throttle's the same, and the clutch pedal, the screws are facing the camera this way, so we'll go ahead and just do this one and see what we have here. First, if you want to adjust the angle of where the pedal is resting, further down, further up, there's not a whole lot of range here, because you have to be mindful of the potentiometer's linkage to the pedal up here. But to adjust it, you have to adjust the threaded rod, how deep it is into the rod end. First, let's take a quick look at that. Let's get while the rod end is still attached with a screw, is when you want to break this stuff loose. The rod end itself has a flat surface on both sides, so that you can actually get a wrench on it, and that is actually a 7/16 wrench. As I hold that, I can take a 1/2 inch wrench on this 1/2 inch nut and break it so it's not locking against the rod end anymore. And once that happens, I can go ahead and loosen or take the screw out that's holding the rod end to the pedal lever. And once I break it loose, I usually just go ahead and use my hand on the socket. And as the screw comes loose, we can get it to come out. And you can see how the lever goes forward automatically. So we can adjust back and forth. But remember, I'm pulling this up out of the way so you can see. There's actually, you do not want to put too much pressure on that potentiometer arm right there. That's where it's bottoming out. So you have to be careful when you set the stop on these things, because that's what's the only thing stopping you. So you don't want too much pressure to be on that potentiometer, because you could strip this arm off of it and have all kinds of problems. So right now it's pretty much, as you can see, if I put it back in there, about as high forward towards the driver as it's going to be, because if I go back any further, I'm bottoming out against the actual arm there. So it's something to be mindful of. So if I could adjust anything, I would make an adjustment going this way with it. Now there is a chance that you could actually adjust this arm itself that's on the potentiometer. You can see the threaded rod between the two of them to make it a little bit longer if you really needed to. But I would really need to before I started having to make adjustments to all that. But I am familiar with these rod ends, because I spent a lot of time in RC modeling as far as flying helicopters, model helicopters, and they had a ton of these on them. Alright, so easy enough. And then once you've made your adjustment, again, this rod end will turn on that threaded rod. So you can turn it whichever way you want. It's a little squeaky too. Looks like you lose a little oil. Alright, so now when we're done with our adjustments, all you got to do is, of course, put your screw back in, tighten it down, and then we'll lock the threaded rod down. Simple enough. Don't want to torque it too much. And we run our nut back down, get our 7/16 and 1/2 inch wrench, hold the rod end while I'm tightening and locking that nut against it. And it doesn't take much, just snug it up and you're done. Now let's talk about the actual preload on this spring here. If it's not enough pressure on the pedal, I can actually take this and compress the spring some more. It'll make it feel harder to push. And it uses the typical, what you see on so many pedal sets, is the 2 1/2 inch or whatever size they are, but 2 nuts that lock against each other. And to change the preload, of course, I would want to back off this back locking nut while I'm holding the front 1/2 inch nut. Like that. They just kind of snap off. So once that's loose, I can thread it back, and then I can do whatever I want to with this nut, which if I turn it this way, it's going to compress the spring and give me more preload. And if I turn it the other way, it's going to actually let the spring get longer, which will give me less, and it'll feel easier to push. Again, it's all personal preference on what you're going to want. I might play with that a little bit. It feels a little light to me just pushing it with my arm. So I'm probably going to tighten that up just a little bit and see how that does once I get them mounted to my rig. And once I'm done, of course, just throw the locking nut back on there, tighten it down against the front nut while I'm holding it so it doesn't turn, and done. So that's it. like I said, it's not a whole lot. Now there is one more thing. I don't want to skip that because it is something that it is important, is the stop. And the stop is very simple. It's a 7/16 nut with a 3/16 grub screw or set screw in it that runs back and forth in this little bracket. And of course you can make it longer to make it stop sooner, or you can make it come back in to have more pedal throw in your clutch or the throttle, whichever one you're messing with. Right, so that's about it on the pedal. So we're going to get over to the brake pedal where there's a little bit more to do and a little bit more to see as far as adjustability. And when we come back, that's where we'll be. Now the brake pedal has the same kind of adjustments that the clutch and the throttle do, as far as the rod end and being able to put that threaded rod, which is actually the piston shaft, into that rod end. But we've already seen that, so there's no sense in us doing anything with that. Now, of course, what we really want to look at is the stack here and how we can adjust that. Currently configured, there's 2 red bumpers in here, and those are actually those really hard urethane bumpers you get with aftermarket upgraded sway bar ends and bushings. They're very hard, and shocks. You've seen them before if you've ever done that kind of upgrade on performance cars. We also have a green bumper in here that comes from, I'm not sure where that comes from. I have to turn it around and take a look at it, but it does have some writing on it. And then we got the black one. So they put these in here, and there's actually another black one here that's long enough, it looks like, to replace both the green and the black. And the black one's kind of soft, but we're going to, like I said before, we're going to get the Durometer rating on all these bumpers in a minute. All right, so typically what we'll see on these slave cylinders to keep these bushings on the shaft is 2 locking nuts in the famous locking nut configuration. Now these are 1/2 inchers, but the problem here is, you see a regular 1/2 inch wrench is kind of thick for strength. And I can get it on the front one, but I can't get it on the back one without the front one interfering with it. So fortunately, they gave us a wrench for that in our little wrench pack. And there it is. And of course that came in our little toolbox, or tool bag rather, not toolbox. It has the Allen wrenches and another one of these wrenches in it. But that wrench will fit on the back one without interfering with the fit for the 1/2 inch wrench on the front one. So I'll go ahead and break the back one loose so it unlocks it. There we go. And now of course I can just take, well, make sure I can spin it there. I can take that one off first. And then we can take the other one off. And if you notice, there's not a lot of tension pressing against these bumpers. Now you can change the preload by adding more tension to this washer that'll preload these bumpers here, and of course those back there. But the main thing I'm doing here is I want to show you how we're taking it off to put a different kind of configuration in here. Now remember, these bumpers affect the travel and the feel of the brake pedal, how stiff it is. You put real stiff bumpers all the way through here, it won't have much travel and it'll feel very stiff. If you put lightweight ones or very soft ones, then you'll have more travel and it'll feel softer as you press the pedal down. Always put a washer between all the bushings. That's always the rule of thumb when messing with these bushings on all these slave cylinders on these hydraulic setups. And actually, they're very similar. Everyone I've ever messed with on hydraulics is very similar to this, so it's all second nature now. I never forget to put a washer in where I used to before, maybe. And here's the green one, and it's got some, okay, so those are the fiber ones that come, I believe these are actually out of Europe, because these are actually seen on the Husingville Engineering pedals. He uses these exclusively with some other ones, the green ones, which are stiff. I can tell that already. A lot stiffer than this black one is. It's softer. So with the green and the black one together, we have a progressive feel to the pedal. We already got some really hard ones here, these red ones. They're just really tough. But then these will add that feeling because of progression, because this black one will compress a little bit before the green one starts compressing. Actually, I really like that, and it comes stock that way, instead of just having a big fat one in there like this soft one installed, and then put a washer on that in the nuts, and that would be pretty soft. And I'll run both ways just to see what they feel like. But I'm pretty sure, as usual, I'm going to like these better. And what's cool here is he's actually used, if you take these bumpers off of here, these high performance ones, if you can see them here, that nice red color. You always look under somebody's car and see these, you know they've upgraded the bumpers to a stiffer, less flexible, high performance type of suspension part. And if you look at this, this is actually a strut or the top of the shock bushing or washer. You see how thick that is compared to the other washers that came off of here. That one was on the back. So these are actually came from wherever they got these from. They got these at the same place because they're for top of shocks. If you guys ever change your shocks, you know what I'm talking about. So we got the red ones, very hard. You know, up to the black one, not very hard. Can you even hear that one? So what we're going to do next is, and what we will do is, of course, once you rebuild it, you put your stack all back on. I would use the same washers they had in the same order. And let's say I just wanted to use that black one. I'm going to go ahead and slide that one on there, put my washer on, and then put my two nuts back on. And I might play with the preload based on how it feels. Easier to do that with one nut in my hand. Get that back on started. There we go. And I would adjust the preload on this based on what I want it to feel like once I had the pedal again and I was actually using it. You can see it squishing it down there. But all that's subjective. It's all personal taste, if you will. And then I'd put this one back on to lock it down. So as far as the brake pedal goes, that's really all the adjustments you're going to need to concern yourself with, besides the actual pedal pad here, because the stop is actually built into the cylinder over here, the master cylinder. So that internally will stop it. So you don't need a grub screw set up like you have over here on your throttle and over there on the clutch. Now what we're going to do is, now we've seen the adjustments, what we're going to do is take the bumpers real quick and put the durometer on it and just record the hardness of these things so you guys get an idea of what they ship with. Of course, if you have other bumpers, then you can do whatever you want to as far as mix and matching, as long as they fit on that shaft there. So when we get back, we'll take a look at the bumpers and see what they rate out at. Now let's take a look at the actual durometer ratings on these bumpers. We're going to use a little durometer. What they call this is a tire hardness tester, and they use this in racing a lot to see what the tires in a race car are doing when they come off the track. First we'll look at how hard these red ones are. And again, these red ones are very stiff because they're used for high performance suspensions. They replace the black looking bushings you find in a lot of the stuff that comes off the assembly lines. So let's look at that one first. Let's see what she rates out at. See if you guys can see this. Let me get a little closer. Here we go. Make sure we get this right. Alright, so I'll put that on there and press on it. And you can see, keep it level there, about 91. So that's very hard. And I imagine this one's very close to that also. Actually, it's a little bit less. Of course, it's easy for these things. It's so hard, it's not easy to get a good reading on these. That's about 90. Okay. So it's very hard. How hard? Well, this rubber one, this green one is very hard also. Very stiff. But it's not as stiff as those. This one will come out to, let's see. You see it's just under those. It's 86 versus 90 and 91. And the black one over here, it turns out to be, let's get it so you can see it. So that's what, 65, 66? So that's a lot softer than the green one is. Oops, back here. And the big black one is probably going to be very close to the same. If I can get a good reading on that one. I have to get him close because he's taller. Yep, about the same. It's right on 66, it looks like. Right, so these are about 66, 67. This one came out to be 90, what was that again? Oh, about 85, between 85 and 86. And of course these guys are really hard. 90. That's pretty hard because this only goes to 100. So it's pretty hard stuff. All right, for those of you who wanted to know and who are taking notes at home, I just wanted to show you what the durometers were. And the importance of this is, to me anyway, it doesn't matter to a lot of people, is if I know the durometer of these bushings that I'm using in my brakes, I can actually test these every 6 months or so, or a year, what have you, and see if they're holding up as far as still as stiff as they're supposed to be. If they're not, I can replace them. And if I have some extra ones laying around, I know by the hardness meter over here how to stack them to get the feel that I pretty much want. In other words, I got some kind of a starting point instead of just throwing on there and hoping for the best. So at least I'll have some kind of educated guess, at least when it comes to buying and testing different types of bumpers for different types of brake feel. All right, so now we're actually going to go and take a look at the brake set here as a whole. This configuration is very similar, I mean really similar, to what we had with the CST GT pedals that Todd Cannon used to make. It's just very, very similar. I'm very familiar with those because, like I said before, I had a set of those pedals and I really liked them. I used them a long time, and I had a floor bracket for them also that I used, and I actually had them backed up against the wall and mounted to a board so that they wouldn't go anywhere as far as sliding around. And again, we saw it had rubber feet on these, but I'm just not sure how well these will do. Maybe if you do bump it up against the floor, or rather the wall behind your simulator, it wouldn't go anywhere. But anyway, I think it'd be better for you to mount it to something. And that's the way I'm going to mount it, and we'll see that in a little bit. But this design has two bars, as I said before. 1/2 inch steel, they're 21 inches long, and right now I have these floor mount brackets all the way out to the ends of the bars. Now, of course, that makes the bars as long as you can possibly make them between the two brackets. And it would be the same if I had this mounted to an Abudo, the Abudo Revolution 3. They have brackets for those, and you still have a long way to mount. Now, I don't know how far or how much room there is there, so I can't really comment on that. I can just show you the results of what I get on these floor brackets. Now, of course, having the long steel bar here, when you press on that brake pedal, you're going to get some movement up here, and we're going to see that in the next segment where I actually put a scale up here, and we'll just see how much movement there is all the way at the ends, and where I would typically have them, and more than likely going to have them, the floor brackets will be moved in, which essentially is going to shorten the bar, which makes it stiffer. But there's going to be some flex in this design because of the bars and the way it's assembled. There's no way around it. You're going to have it. You can do things maybe to help alleviate some of that flex or deflection by maybe running a bar on the back and the front of these brackets that each one of these pedals is mounted to. Maybe if you extended them a couple inches each way, and then you had some kind of a bar system with multiple holes in it to go on top of those, then you could mount, or rather slide your pedals where you wanted them to be, and tighten everything down, and then tighten the bar down on top of that, which would be a little bit more inconvenient as far as adjusting the pedals, because right now there's no more easily adjustable pedals as far as lateral, where you want to position them, that I've ever seen. And the same stands with when I had them from Todd Cannon. All you do is, of course, like the steel collars we saw before, you just turn these little 1/8 inch set screws, and it doesn't take just a little turn at all, and you move them around. Now I can slide these things anywhere I want. I can push the throttle around, I can push the brake pedal anywhere I want it, if I want to do left foot braking, or if I want to push them together and do a more of a heel and toe action. And then once I have them where I want them, it's just a matter of tightening them back down again with like not even a quarter of a turn, and you're ready to go. And I would keep the set screws facing towards me when I'm driving, so it's just a matter of actually taking an 1/8 inch driver or a regular type of Allen wrench and tighten them down. You can reach right down underneath and get to them and loosen them and tighten them and reposition your pedals really quickly. That's one of the great features of this type of set. So the not so great stuff, of course, is the deflection you get in the bending of the pedals. And again, we're going to see more of that later on. But there's another thing that these pedals in particular, this set comes with. Now, when I got my set from Todd Cannon years ago, he actually had in collars on the back too. I'm going to turn this around so you can see what I'm talking about. All right. And we're going to zoom in just a little so we can get in a little tighter on what I'm talking about here. Come back out a little bit. There we go. Now, you see some collars back here, and you're going, hey, they do have collars on these. Well, no, they don't. These are just collars that I had left over from before. Let me loosen them up here real quick so they spin around. Okay, these are already loose. That's loose. Okay. So I actually put some collars on the back. And the reason I did that is because without these collars in the back, even though we've got no movement between this bracket and the rod, because we've got the collars on the front, in the back, we've got some movement. And if you can see that. It moves on the rod there, which I don't really care for. And I would like to see them include these collars on the back, because look what happens if you do have them in the back. All you got to do is tighten them down again, just like you do on the front. And of course, again, I would spin these around and have these set screws facing towards me so I could reach down in between and loosen these in between them just by reaching underneath my wheel. But now once I have those on there, you can see the difference. Now there's nothing. There is no play. Now, I'm not even sure if that play really affects the feel of the pedals. But just seeing that lateral play is a bit, I just don't like it, and I would rather not have it. Now, you're going to see some lateral play in the pedal itself. You can see that. But you have to have that because you don't want this pedal binding up. If it was tight and we didn't have any lateral movement at all, it would be binding against the bearings and spacers in here, and that would not be a good thing. It would just wear them out quicker. You need some kind of play, and each pedal will have that, or each pedal lever will have that, which you want. But the brackets themselves, and again over here, if you look at this one, just slide it over a little, you can see it moves also, just the bracket itself. And I went ahead and put one over on this side. And if I go ahead and tighten that one down, you can see it's not moving anymore. Now, I ran out of spacers because I didn't have as many as I wanted, but I would have another one over here too. But that does help it a bit just by putting one up there. And of course, we're going to have the same issue over here. You can see it moving a little. You can actually hear it a little too. So again, just tighten it up with the collars and you won't have it anymore. No more noise and it's not moving anymore. I would prefer to see that they would install these on a high-end set of pedals like this, because I don't think these collars are really that expensive comparing, I mean, when you're comparing it to the rest of the expense of the pedal set. With this hydraulic unit, we're looking at like $1,200. So yeah, I think that they should put these collars on here with every unit, or if you have the units, I would call them and request some extra collars just to get rid of that movement, just to help tighten things up on the lateral plane here. So, that being said, other than that, I don't have any problem with it. Now, also in this design, I just want to talk for a minute, because I've been running these pedals for a while, and I'll run them for a while, I'll take them back off and shoot some video for the review, and I'll run them again, and that's just the way I do reviews, and then I cut and paste everything back together, and when the final video comes out, that's what you'll see. So, when I was running these pedals, yes, there is deflection, and we're going to see that, like I said, in the next segment. But, let's get a little closer in on them. The flex in this bar is movement, perceived movement in your pedal when you push your foot on it and you're pushing down. You can feel that movement. But you can also feel the movement of these bumpers up here. You can see they move. So when they're moving, that's flex and deflection also that you feel, and that affects the pedal travel rather, and the feel of the pedal overall. So this is also going to be flexing at the same time, and your foot is going to feel the sum of all that deflection or flex or movement and bottom out. because even the steel bar is going to flex, but it's only going to flex so much. If you keep the same pressure applied to it, it's going to stop flexing at some point. And if you repeat that same pressure, then it's going to flex to that point again and no further. So there should be no variance in the flex of this pedal because it's steel. Yeah, it's going to flex, but how much it flexes determines, there's a lot of things that are going to determine that. Well, not a lot, but a couple of things. When I put these brackets in, and when we do that on the test, I'll show you that, it's not going to be as much flex in this bar because we've essentially shortened the bar here by bringing the brackets in closer. And my foot was able to determine the total amount of flex I was getting, or movement I was getting in this brake pedal. But because this is steel, it's very repeatable. In fact, because it's steel, it's more repeatable than it's going to be with these rubber bumpers that we use, or these urethane bumpers. They're going to degrade, and we know this. That's a given. These bumpers are going to degrade over time. And sometimes, depending on how much you use your brakes, of course, or your pedal set, is how fast they're going to degrade. And you're going to have to replace them if you want to maintain the durometer rating that you have on your pedal set and the travel. As they deteriorate, the travel is going to increase. But when a steel bar, that's not going to happen. Well, it shouldn't happen anyway. If it's any kind of decent steel, there shouldn't be an increase in the flex of that steel bar over time, unless it's a lot of time, I would imagine. So the whole point is, even though you're seeing flex here in this brake pedal, when you're actually driving this set, you can't feel it. I know it's there. In fact, when I'm driving it, I know it's there, and I want to be able to say, see that? That's not a very good pedal because the steel bar is flexing. Well, because it's just one more piece of the movement picture with the durometers and the hydraulic fluid, when you throw that in the equation, which doesn't move that much, of course, it's hydraulic fluid, but there is some compression, or there would never be any movement of the piston here. You have to compress it, which compresses the piston, which makes the durometer squish together, which gives us our travel and feel. Well, the steel bar is just a sum of that, is another piece of that sum of the movement and the feel of flex that you get in your pedal. And our bodies with our brake foot are able to recognize that. And we just compute it, and as long as it's repeatable and it doesn't change on us, then it's a non-issue. At least it was for me. I had very good repeatable braking that is just as good with any other brake pedal that I use. The only preferences for me come into pedals is, everybody has their personal preference on the feel they want. They want hydraulic, they want a load cell with the bumpers, or they want a load cell with spring, or they just want a potentiometer. It all is going to feel a little different. So then it comes down to personal preference of what you like. But now I remembered, and I just want to say that I just remembered when I was using these pedals how much I liked my CSTs, GT CSTs that I had that Todd Cannon built when I was using those. And the memories came back, and I was just as consistent, but it has a better feel because of the hydraulic system in here. I really like this, actually. And it feels consistent. My threshold braking is fine. My trail braking works fine. I can repeat it, and I never had a problem so far anyway. And of course, we're not through the review yet, but I haven't had any problem with this brake pedal not being any consistent or as consistent as the other brake pedal I use. Once my leg and my foot and my body feels where that threshold braking point is on this pedal, and as long as it, like I said before, is repeatable, you're not going to notice any difference, even though this bar is flexing. And we live in a visual world these days, and it's just unnerving to see that thing flexing. And I knew that before. Now, like I said, when I was thinking about the CST pedals, I said, you know what? Those things would flex too, and I knew that, but I've forgotten all about it. So let's go and find out just how much deflection or flex we get in this pedal set with the floor brackets all the way apart, and with them moved into a decent, or what I would call decent, this is way too wide here, move them in to where, number one, they're going to fit in my rig properly, and number two, the way that I want my pedal spaced. Even if I'm doing left foot braking, I don't need this much room. My legs will be going way out like this. So let's go ahead and get to the next segment where we're actually going to put a little scale up here and a mark, and we'll see how much deflection we get or movement we get in this bar with the pedals set up just like this, and then I'm going to move the brackets in and see what the differences are. And we're going to clamp these down to the table with some clamps so it can't move, so we can have at least some kind of a repeatable test going on here. So let's get to that segment now. Okay, now we got our little test set up. First thing I did was remove the rubber feet from the floor mount brackets because they're spongy. and we don't want those influencing our results. So they're gone. Then I actually took and mounted some tough, very heavy-duty iron clamps that I use in woodworking and welding and such, and I'm going to use that to hold it down so it's not going anywhere. Sitting on about a 380-pound wood workbench, so I won't be able to move that either. And I'm going to use just my hand, or my arm rather, to push the brake pedal and see if we get any deflection on that front steel rod. Now, of course, I can't put anywhere near as much pressure with my arm as I could with my leg sitting in my racing seat in the rig. But this will give us a general idea of whether it actually moves at all or not. So let's see. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a little bit so we can get a better look at my little scale here. And that's just a piece of white tape with a nice straight black mark on it, and it just happens to coincidentally line up with the mark over there, which is kind of neat. So let me go ahead and give it a shove and see what we got. So we can see there is some movement here. Okay, that wore me out. So now what we want to do is, like I said before, I want to take the floor mount brackets and move them closer in on the bar. That means I got to move these pedals closer together. And right now, I got to admit, these pedals definitely have some major wide spacing in them. I probably wouldn't have them this wide when I'm there in my rig anyway. So I'm going to move them in closer to the brake pedal. I'm going to leave the brake pedal in the middle so that stays the same, and move everything as close as I can. And then we'll take another look and see if we get any deflection off of our little white mark then. So when we come back, we'll have all that set up and we'll give that a shot. So now we have a different orientation. I had to turn the actual brackets around to the edge of my table because once I shortened them, and you can see how short they are now, you can see how much rod is sticking out of each side of it. And I had to put my clamps down on the edge that way instead of the long way on the table so they would reach. So now, back to our scale and see what we can get off of that. Alright, we're still lined up on the line, and now I'm going to go over and give it a shove with the arm and see how much movement we've got this time. Let's see here. Okay, we're still getting some movement, but it looks like we're not getting the same amount of movement, which of course proves out the theory that the closer we get with our brackets on those metal bars, the stiffer that bar becomes, because it becomes essentially a shorter bar. So we've got the pedals mounted to the Sim Experience Stage 4 rig, and I'll show you what that looks like real quick. We've got those heavy duty bolts that we're holding the rubber feet on bolted to the actual plate. And if you look here, you can see there's about 4 inches of the bars protruding on the left side and another 3 inches or so on the right side. So we've shortened the bar essentially because of how we moved the brackets and how I set this up for this rig. And this is the way I like it set up after measuring everything and where my feet are, and still have the lateral movement that I want in the brake pedal and the throttle pedal, so I can do heel and toe, or I can just do left foot braking comfortably. So now we got the scale back up there, got the machinist ruler up there, and we'll go ahead and get in tight on that and take a look and see what kind of deflection we're getting here. If I can get it to where it'll focus. Stay in focus. That's about right. So remember, I'm pushing with my leg now and my foot, just like I would if I'm racing in iRacing or some other simulator. I'm putting the full force of my foot on it and my leg, bracing against the steering wheel in the back of the seat of the car. So let's see what we got. So we can see it is deflecting as we thought it would. But I will say something about this. This deflection amount is pretty consistent. So it's always ending up at the same spot when it does go down. And the reason I mentioned that, and the only reason I noticed that, is because when I just spent a short time driving the pedals just to take them for a spin basically, and this brake pedal feels great. It might be the hydraulics or something else, but I'm able to brake consistently. My threshold braking is good so far, and this is just a short test. And my times are the same with the same cars and the same tracks and the same setups that I had before. I'm not off or gaining anything really either way, which means this brake is pretty consistent, which really I'm not that surprised about because I had the GT pedals from CST back when they were being made, and also had the F1 pedals from CST, and they worked great too. And we really didn't notice the flex. Well, we noticed it. We knew it was there because it's inherent in this hanging pedal design here, but we really didn't care. Well, it was the best pedals you could get at the time, and it really didn't matter once you're in the car running it, even though it doesn't look good as I press it down and you see that deflection. You see the movement. But there's no way to get rid of that on this type of pedal configuration. It's going to be there. It's part of, if you will, the travel of the brake pedal. Just like the bumpers in the slave cylinder stack are part of the pedal travel and feel. And they should deflect the same every time also, unless they get old and they start losing some of their elasticity, then they'll have a problem. But I just want to show you guys this and make the comment that I really, once I'm driving, even though I know it's there and I'm trying to feel the difference and feel something that's messing up my braking, but it's not happening. It's very consistent. So we'll get to more descriptions about how the brake pedal feels and the throttle and all that on the next segment, but we just wanted to take a look at it and see what kind of deflection we get once we finally get it mounted exactly where it's going to be when you're actually driving the car in this particular rig. So the next thing we'll do is we'll get into the calibration of the pedals and the driver and the software that comes with the pedals and look how all that works. This is the driver that comes with the sim pedals, and you can see that 100% across the board there for the clutch, brake, and gas. And there's also some other adjustments in here for dead zone and things like that that I didn't need to use. And there's 3 of them. And when you hit the calibrate pedals button, and once you do that, you can hit the gas pedal and you can see it goes up to 42%. And that's from 7% to 42%. Now that doesn't mean anything except the actual physical travel of the potentiometer arm. 42% is the maximum I can get based out of a potential 100%. That's all that is. So it's telling the computer what the range is of that potentiometer when I press the gas pedal. And the same thing happens when you hit the brake pedal. I'm at like 41, 42% maybe. It starts out at 10%. That's just the range of that pressure module that's on the hydraulic system on these pedals. And if you go over to clutch, the same thing happens. I have 32% there. I believe we're starting at 0 on the clutch. So that's just telling the computer what the range is of the potentiometer, how much percent of range I get out of it, based on a total travel of 0 to 100%. And you'll see once we're done with this and we hit the stop calibration button, I go to 0% on all the pedals, and now when I press the gas pedal, you can see that it'll actually go from 0 all the way to 100%. So now the computer knows that that's the range of this pedal, the physical range. And the same thing with the brake pedal, goes up to 100% from 0%. And we go over to clutch and it'll do the same thing. So it's a pretty simple program really. All you have to do is once you're done, I didn't have to use again any of the dead zone adjustments, so once you're done with the configuration, just hit write settings, and once you do, that'll write the settings to a registry for your computer so that your computer knows what the range of the pedals is. Now we'll get into the actual driver and iRacing and how to set that up. So here we are at the familiar iRacing driver, and we're just going to go through some quick settings here and set the pedals up. And I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with this, so I'll just go over real quickly, or as quick as I can, with how I've set it up. On the brakes over here, you can see my force factor is at 0 because it's a pressure sensor. That's what I'm going to use, and I would use that for a load cell also, just 0, 0, and leave it at that. Now we'll go over to the pedal calibration and bring that up, and we'll do the throttle calibration first. And you can see that we go up to 4095, 100%. So the calibration we did in the computer is showing what we did in the computer is showing up now here. So next we'll go to the brake and we'll set that up to, press as hard as I can, 4095. Alright, so we got 4095 out of that one too. And of course the clutch, we're going to get 4095 out of that because of the way that we calibrate in the software. Now I'm not a software guy, so I don't know exactly how all this is working, but I just want to calibrate it in iRacing using their driver like everybody else does, and then we'll just go ahead and get in with actually driving the car. There's not much else to be done here. It's a very simple thing to do, and I know a lot of these guys do it every time they get in. They recalibrate their pedals just to make sure everything is working like it should. So now that we've got all this done, we'll go ahead and shut the driver down and get into the car and actually take it for a spin and see what these pedals look like when you're actually driving them. Alright, so we're in the Super V8 Ford in iRacing, and we're testing the pedals out here, see how they work. Make sure I can get over there with my heel and toe action and get the clutch and everybody to work relatively at the same time. And then we'll go out and see how well this thing runs. Now I know you don't have to do heel and toe in the Ford Super V8 before you guys tell me that, but it's a fun car to drive that way, and it's just a fun car in general. It's a very difficult car to handle. You need a good throttle pedal for this kind of car. It has so much torque. You really got to have a smooth throttle pedal that's consistently smooth, and you know exactly where it's at with your foot position to be able to put the power down right or correctly with a car like this. There's so much torque in this car, it's so easy to spin out when you accelerate out of a turn. It reminds me of the Corvette GT car, the C6R in iRacing, the same deal. You've got to be very smooth and easy on the throttle coming out of the turn, or it's just going to spin out on you. It has so much torque. But it's still a fun car to drive, and likewise the Ford I'm driving now. So the throttle in this set really does a good job, and really there's not too much to it, a spring and a potentiometer, but it does a good job. I don't have any problems with throttle at all. I can drive all day with this throttle and be very, very precise with it. Now the brake pedal, let's talk a little bit about that. The brake pedal, again, I wanted to be able to point out to you guys the deficiencies in this brake pedal. Like I said before in this review when I first got started, that, you know, when you see the flex in the bar, and we live in a visual world, when you're pressing on that brake pedal, you go, oh my God, that's terrible, that's horrible. There's no way that could be a consistent brake pedal. But again, like I explained before, that's my thoughts on why the pedal feels as good as it does, is the flex is also combined with the bumpers being depressed and everything else going on, so it's just, again, one of the parts of the sum of what the total brake pedal feel is. And this brake pedal is very, very consistent. It's just as consistent as any other brake pedal. Once you press on it and you find your threshold pressure, and you repeat that pressure every time, that threshold gets repeated every time. So I have no problem with it, and the hydraulics on this brake pedal are really fantastic. It's a very smooth feeling pedal, and it's repeatable, and that's the main thing. Can it repeat? Can you trail brake repeatedly into the turns? And it does that. It gets the job done, and I don't have any problems with this brake pedal at all. I thought I would have, but like I said before earlier, I don't. It's a great brake pedal. It works. And again, in a visual world, when you see that metal rod bending from the pressure of applying the brake pedal, it just doesn't make any sense that it works as good as it does. But it does. And again, like I said before in the previous review, back when I had the Todd Cannon pedals, the same thing was true with them, even with their flex. So I really like these pedals. I'm a little surprised I'm saying that myself, but I can't say that they're not good, because they are. So let's go ahead to final thoughts now. Final thoughts on the Sim pedals from Main Performance. Let's look at the cons of this pedal set first. Well, at around $1,200, as you see configured here, with this nice hydraulic system sitting on top of it, these pedals are really expensive. But like most pedals at this type of performance level, they're going to be expensive. And at this price point, I would like to see them configured with the metal collars on the back support bar like they are on the front support bar. I mean, they're only steel collars. How much can they cost? The floor brackets themselves, they could have been smoothed up a bit and deburred on the corners where the welds are before they were sent off to powder coat. And this is one of the things that I brought up with Michael Main when I was actually talking to him about the pedal set. The clutch pedal over here is really nothing special. I'd like to see some kind of a realistic clutch pedal feel designed into it. I think they're capable of doing that. And at this price level, I'd like to see something like that, like some of the other pedals have. The design itself has flexing in the support bars when pushed. Although, really, I didn't realize any performance issues because of this. But still, let me put it this way. In today's visual world, it ain't pretty to look at when these bars are flexing. Now the pros. These are a true GT pedal set with no conversion necessary to get that great GT car feel. I really didn't realize how much I missed actually driving with this type of pedal setup. Back when I had my CSTs, I really liked driving those at the time, but I just kind of forgot about it. And the hydraulic system adds a certain smoothness to the brake stroke that only a hydraulic system can deliver. The overall brake feel is excellent and very repeatable. I've never had any issues with my threshold braking or trail braking. They just had a nice and consistent braking feel that I really liked it. Also, these pedal set, they're plug and play with Xbox, with PlayStation consoles, Fanatic steering wheels, Thrustmaster steering wheels, and Logitech, the G25 and G27 steering wheel systems. I think that's pretty impressive in a world where most high-end pedal sets, they only work with PCs. On a whole, I really like these pedals. They get the job done, and they're just plain old fun to use. In fact, I still have them mounted and running in my rig today. There's just something about a real GT pedal setup that just, you can't really duplicate it with anything else, especially not with the floor-mounted pedals that we have today. Well, that's it for now. I'm Barry Rowland, and thanks again for watching the Sim Racing Garage channel.